Welcome everyone. Great to see you again. We are going to jump into session 2 of our Essentials group on Exodus. Today, Marjorie and I are going to discuss a little bit about the burning bush, which is chapters 2 and 3 of Exodus. And so I'd invite you to jump right in with us. Marjorie, thanks for being here. If you were to sort of make one statement, if there's one major takeaway here, what is the most important part about this passage that you'd like us to notice?
I would say this passage shows us that we can know God. This is about knowing God in a personal way. God is not just a bureau or some authority barking orders. In this passage, we see God's incredible intimate concern and this conversation with one man, Moses. The narrative is sort of sped along with national events, and then it just slows way down to this moment with Moses near Mount Sinai.
And then what about the burning bush itself? Why the burning bush? It's just such a strange feature of the narrative. Why do you think a burning bush is involved in Moses' calling?
Well, I don't actually know the answer. I do know it's worth thinking about and having it as a part of our spiritual imagination. It is vivid. It's amazing to think that there's something that is fire that doesn't consume. There's this bush with its little leaves, and this fire doesn't consume it. And that in of itself is worth thinking about a lot. We know that, of course, it is in many images of fire that God appears to the Israelites. God appears as a pillar, a fiery pillar of light to lead them in the night, and smoke during the day. When Moses later receives the commandments on Mount Sinai, the mountain is consumed with fire. Yet, once again, fire that doesn't seem to harm Moses. And I think in terms of that projecting a kind of holiness, once again, I don't want to give the definitive answer, but certainly that is part of what's going on here, that there's this incredible, intense, brilliant energy that is part of who
kind
God
of power.
is. Yes.
Yeah.
And we call this a theophany, when God, who is spirit, appears in a tangible way, that Moses knows this is God. There's a voice of the angel of the Lord that speaks, but the angel of the Lord speaks as though he is God, and then eventually actually he just is God. That's how he's addressing Moses.
Well, what about the detail? People notice this, taking the shoes off. Why does Moses take his shoes off? Why do you think that detail is included in this passage as well?
Once again, I'm interested what other people think, but it is God actually who tells him to take his shoes off. That's an interesting part of this. And God says that it is holy ground. And he actually also says to Moses, don't come near. As though there's some sort of danger, that Moses might be in danger if he came any closer. And that taking off his shoes somehow is helping to make this meeting safe for him. So I don't understand this really, although I know, especially as I know God through Jesus, what I know is that God's holiness is completely approachable. I know God's mercy, but we cannot read Exodus without seeing that in some ways God's holiness is equated with danger, and his presence is somehow dangerous, even though loving.
So what about the conversation then between Moses and God? If God is this God who is somewhat dangerous, then tell us about the conversation itself.
Well, the conversation is wonderful because apparently God has been watching what's been going on with the Israelites very carefully. He says he has seen the affliction, he has heard their cry, and he knows their suffering. And we get that sense that he literally knows it. And because we will learn that God is personal, he has a name, that he actually feels their suffering. He's deeply concerned about them. He has this intimate conversation in which he actually asks Moses basically to trust him, that Moses is going to be the deliverer. Moses has some worries about this, but God is talking in the most sensitive way. This smoking deity is speaking in the most tender, sensitive way to Moses.
And he gives Moses his name. So can you
Yes.
tell us about him giving his own name to
Yes.
Moses and to us?
So the name, we know it as Yahweh. That has all the little syllables that would be part of it. But it basically means I am or I will be, which kind of is a name that encompasses all time, everywhere. The Israelites did not refer to God by the name. They would just spell it out without the vowels, because once again, it was this sense of the holiness of the name. But I think the most significant thing is that God has a name. God is a personal God. God wants to relate to his people in a way that they can call upon him with his name.
Wow, that's powerful. Well, we do hope that you have a wonderful discussion talking about God's name, his intimacy with Moses, and hopefully his intimacy with you as well. Thank you, Marjorie, and we hope your discussion is rich.